Hello friend, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to discuss about the core difference between the equity share, preference share and debt. Now let's start. First, there is basis, equity, preference share and debt. What is the difference between equity, preference and debt? Now, first point, basis. Risks to the company. What is the risk to the company while issuing equity, while issuing preference share and while issuing debt? Risks to the company. For equity, low risks. Risks to the company, it is low risks. Why? Low risks. No question of repayment of the capital except when the company is under liquidation. Hence, based from the point of risks. Means there is no question of repayment of capital in equity share except when the company is under liquidation. Hence, based from point of risks. Similarly, preference share. Slightly higher risks when compared to equity capital. Slightly higher risks when compared to equity capital. Principal is redeemable after a certain period of time even if dividend payment is based on profits. Means in preference share we have to give a principal in certain period of time which is redeemable. Principal is redeemable after a certain period of time even if dividend payment is based on profits. Now debt, it's higher risks. Capital should be repaid as per the agreement. Interest should be paid irrespective of profit. That means for the debt holder, interest and principal should be repaid after a certain period of time in redeemable period irrespective of profit. Now second point, risks to the investor. We already discussed about risks to the company. What was the risks to the company? Now risks to the investors from company point of view, and this is from investor point of view. Risks to the investors. In equity, there is high risks since they get the annual dividend and the repayment of the capital in case of liquidation. Since they get the annual dividend and the repayment of capital in case of liquidation only after the preference shareholder and debt holder. For equity shareholder, they can get the annual dividend and repayment of the capital in case of liquidation only after debt holder and preference holder. Similarly, preference share slightly less risky is computed or compared to equity. Slightly less risks as compared to equity. Preference shareholders have preferential right in term of payment of dividend and repayment of capital. Preference shareholders have a preferential right in terms of payment of dividend and repayment of capital. In case of debt, there is less risky since they get interest and repayment of capital before making payment to preference and equity. Then debt holder will get first priority for repayment of capital and interest. Also, interest is charged against profit and hence they get fixed rate of interest even if the company is not making any profit. As we all know that interest is charged against profit and hence they get fixed rate of interest even if the company is not making any profit. Now, third point, cost to the company. What is the cost to the company? In equity, highest cost. Dividend expectation of shareholders are higher than interest rate. Also, dividends are not tax deductible because they are appropriation of profit. We all know that dividend is not a tax deductible as they are appropriation of profit. Appropriation means divide. Divide means dividend, where equity shareholders get from their share, that is dividend, means appropriation of profit. In preference share, slightly cheaper than cost of equity. We are discussing about cost of company. In preference share, it is slightly cheaper than a cost of equity, but higher than interest rate. On loan funds. Further, preference dividend are not tax deductible because they are appropriation of profit. Preference shareholders are also eligible to get the preference dividend, which is not a tax deductible since they are appropriation of profit. In case of debt, comparatively cheaper. Prevailing interest rate are considered only to the extent after tax impact. That is, interest is charged against profit, we all know that, and hence there is tax saving. If we pay the interest amount, or if we deduct the interest from our profit and loss account, then it will decrease our profit. When it will decrease our profit, there is ultimately effect in tax saving, which we will pay to the government. Prevailing interest rate are considered only to the extent of after tax impact. Interest is charged against profit and hence there is tax saving. Whereas dividends, preference dividends and equity, they are not tax deductible because they are appropriation of profit. Dividends are final. Third point. Now we are going to discuss fourth point. Fourth point, basis, equity, preference and debt. In same way, 4 number, dilution of control or ownership. Before going to understand this point, we will discuss what is dilution of control or ownership. What is dilution or voting right? Okay, so we will go on next page. Here is this page. Dilution of control or ownership occurs. What does dilution actually means? Okay, dilution of control or ownership occurs when a company issue additional shares of stock. Means when a company issue additional shares of stock, which results in the existing shareholders owning a smaller percentage of the company than they did before. That means when you are a shareholder of any company, let us suppose company A. If company A issue through the IPO, initial public offering, then there will be the more shareholders as before than before. That means the percentage of the shareholders increased. However, the percentage of your shareholding in the company will become less. That means when a company issue additional share of stock, which results in the existing shareholders owning a smaller percent of the companies than they did before. That is, when a company issue a new share of stock, the ownership of the company is divided among a larger number of shareholders, which can reduce the percentage ownership of existing shareholders. I think you have understood about it. This can happen in several ways, including how dilute ownership can be dilute. Then from IPO, if primary offering IPO is offered by any company, then when a company issue a new share of stock to the public in a primary offering, that is IPO, the existing shareholders ownership percentage will be reduced. Similarly, secondary offering, if existing shareholders sell some of their shares to the public in a secondary offering or market, their ownership percentage will be reduced. Similarly, convertible securities, if a company issue a convertible securities such as convertible bond or convertible preferred stock, the holders of these securities can convert them into common stocks or common shares, which can dilute the ownership percentage of existing shareholders. I think you have understood about what is dilution of control or ownership. Now we are going to talk about the voting rights. What the voting rights actually means. Equity shareholders typically have voting rights in a company. When someone buys shares of company stock in a company, they become an equity shareholders and are entitled to vote on certain matters related to the company governance. Some common type of matters that equity shareholders may be able to vote on include in what way or in what matter they can include their voting power, voting right means in election of the board of director BOD, major business decision that is merger or acquisition, dividends, change in company's AOA, article of association or any bylaws. These are done through the or they have the voting rights to participate to involve in companies for their shareholders decision. So why we are reading these dilutions and voting rights, the same words are included in point number 4, means dilution of control or ownership. For equity, equity shareholders are entitled to vote. Yeah, equity shareholders are entitled to vote as they are the shareholders, and hence they dilute of the ownership. I think you have understood now what this sentence was written. They dilute of the control or ownership. Preference stock. Generally, preference shareholders are not entitled to vote and hence they do not dilute control. Generally, preference shareholders are not entitled to vote and hence they do not dilute control or ownership. However, sometimes they can if they have the voting rights. If they have the voting rights, they can dilute or control on ownership. But generally, they are not entitled to vote. Debt. Debenture holders are not entitled to vote and hence they do not dilute control or ownership. I think you have understood now. Point number 5, permanent or temporary source of fund. Is this is redeemable or is this is irredeemable? In equity shareholders, is equity shares are redeemable or irredeemable? Equity shares are always irredeemable. As we have discussed in the point number 1, equity shareholders are always irredeemable. That is permanent source of funding. Preference stock, redeemable as well as irredeemable. Preference share, redeemable as well as irredeemable, that is temporary as well as permanent. In case of debt, redeemable as well as irredeemable, that is temporary as well as permanent. Means redeemable means we have to provide the preference shareholders or debt debenture holders in a certain maturity period. They are able to or they are liable to repay the principal and interest at a certain period or at a maturity period. Likewise, it is irredeemable and vice versa. This was the 5 point, very important. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. Thank you.